Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Canberra Business Chamber webinar on key opportunities for exporting from the ACT. First, I'd like to acknowledge the ACT government's support in producing this webinar. I hope you find it useful and they support our broader international business engagement program as well. And today, I'd like to welcome Anthony Weymouth. Anthony is the Head of Defence, Advanced Manufacturing and Space for Austrade, which sounds like an extremely cool title. And he's going to talk to us about goods and services being exported from the ACT, what are the best target markets, and indeed about what Austrade does. So, Anthony, welcome to the Canberra Business Chamber.
Thank you very much, Greg, and really look forward to having a chat.
Yeah, look, it's great to have you here. And I guess, let's perhaps just start with Austrade. Many people have heard of Austrade. They know it's the government's sort of trade promotion agencies, but possibly people don't have a really good idea of the size of it or what you do. So just tell us a little bit about what goes on in the Austrade world.
Okay, so Austrade is the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. Our role is to work with Australian companies to help them pursue export markets around the world. We have offices in about 80 or 90 locations, and I say about because we open and close depending on market opportunity, but yeah, it's around 80 or 90 locations. It's about helping Australian companies export their products and services into those markets, but importantly also in attracting foreign direct investment to Australia. We also play a role in tourism under policy and research. And obviously education is one of Australia's largest exports. So just making sure that people know we're involved in education as well.
And education is one of the key export industries from the ACT, which sounds a little bit odd, but actually all those foreign students coming in, that's export revenue coming into the territory, right?
Absolutely it is. And it's one of Australia's largest service exports behind tourism. Yeah. So a really important sector.
Okay, cool. So look, I guess if you're a business watching this, you might be thinking, well, I do a great job of producing the goods or the services. How do you know when you're ready to start exporting?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and I suppose there's many ways of looking at it. To me, one of the most important things organisations, companies, whether large or small, need to really think about is why. Why are you thinking about exporting? Is it about trying to achieve your growth ambition, which is a great reason for doing it? Or is it about trying to stay in business because you've lost all your customers in Australia, which is probably the wrong reason for doing it? So the motivation for thinking about exporting does vary across companies, but really important consideration that I think organisations should think about carefully. And one of the most important factors is buy-in from senior management. Exporting is not easy. It takes a long time, and it actually costs money as well. It pulls in resources from the organisation, both from a people point of view, but also dollars. So you really need to make an informed management decision as to why you want to think about exporting, and then carefully plan that. And we're really happy to help companies do that.
So, I mean, that's a really good point about the costs that you incur when you're thinking about exporting. I mean, there's presumably a need to build a lot of relationships internationally, so there's a bit of travel there. If you're exporting physical goods, there's obviously some big costs potentially in terms of freight and brokerage around that. Are there other things that you need to be thinking about as business?
Yeah, you need to look at your business model as well. And it's about scalability. So if you're producing a good or a product, I don't know, let's say you're a wine manufacturer or bottler, if you want to ramp up and chase the US market, which is massive for wine, what does that mean for your business? Potentially that means investing a lot of money to increase production capacity. So there's cost in Australia as well. There's also a real need to get the correct advice. And so that means when you look at the contract side of securing business in international markets, you don't go to your local solicitor who did your mortgage, for example, your conveyancing. You really want to get expert advice because the legal frameworks that you're going to be operating in are different to Australia. So there are lots of additional costs that come with it, but the benefit is large. And I suppose in a place like the ACT, which is a relatively small local market, One of the challenges for companies is about growing their business opportunity, and certainly looking at outside of the ACT into other territories and states around Australia. That's obviously the first step, but to really build your business and grow, and I suppose reach the total addressable market for your product or service offering, you really should be thinking international. That's where the scale goes. Australia as a country, only 24 million or so people. It's not a massive market. And therefore, for most Australian companies, it's essential to consider international markets to achieve the scale and to, and also to diversify risk, because if you've got, let's say you're working with the Department of Defence in Australia, and I do work in the defence area, I work with defence industry. The Australian Department of Defence is one customer only, and it's a very lumpy business. You go up and down with that transactions with the Department of Defence. And so to manage as an organisation, to keep your staff employed, to keep innovation flowing through the system, you need to expand your customer base. And again, looking at international markets is a way to do that.
So I think your point about scale is really important. And obviously exporting or beginning to export is a great way of growing your business. But should you be starting to look at the biggest markets, or should you be starting somewhere small, do you think?
Yeah, so market selection is really important. And for most companies, the way they get into export for the first time varies. Some companies will be planned and have a great strategy and follow that through to the letter and have a map of the world, and they'll work out where their most appropriate target market is. For other companies, it's opportunistic, and the phone will ring, or an email will come through, or a LinkedIn request will happen, and there'll be a business lead that you might want to follow through on. So opportunistic opportunities will pop up for business, but even if they do, you really need to think about the opportunity in that market, and can your business fulfill that opportunity? And importantly, the business model as well. Is your business model transferable to an international market that doesn't speak English? If you are looking at Japan, for example, which is a fantastic market for Australia, you really need to be thinking about what you're doing to your product or service offering to customize it for local conditions. Again, depending on what the product or service is. But so market selection, really important consideration. Many Australian companies, they sell to New Zealand. Some people think it's just another part of Australia, and it is from a business point of view. It's very easy. Singapore is similar on the food and beverage side, very easy to sell into Singapore. But when you go beyond, it then requires a bit.
And in terms of making sure that your product or service is right for other markets, you've also got to be thinking about the marketing, right, and all your collateral and everything, making sure that it's in the right language, featuring people in the right cultural context, and that you're not using words that might just not make sense in the other context. And even from here to New Zealand, for example, there's some significant dialectal differences and some words that mean different things on each side of the Tasman. So you probably want to be getting some advice on that sort of stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what the Austrade staff in overseas markets are there to do. So our business development managers, the jewel in our crown overseas, they're essentially your staff overseas to work with to help you look at the opportunities in those markets. The way we work with companies, we want to meet you, we want to understand your business, we want to give you frank and honest advice. We may say to you, now it's not a good time to think about exporting. We may say that. Or we may go down a path of, market selection and identifying which countries could be opportunistic for you, in which case we'll then engage our overseas staff. And they will give that local advice in terms of what you need to be thinking about when you want to export to Malaysia, for example, because there are some considerations around religion in Malaysia, for example. But another area where you really do have to think about with international markets is intellectual property protection. For most companies, depending on what business you're in, it's an important consideration, even just copyright on your name. It could be as simple as that. But making sure you're considering IP, because when you're going into those overseas markets, you want to protect what's your company's assets. and IP is a key one.
Yeah, okay. Just if anyone does have any questions as we're rolling through this conversation, just drop them into the Q&A chat function on Teams here, and we'll come to those towards the end of the conversation. But Anthony, talk to me a little bit more about where the opportunities are. We've got New Zealand a little bit to the east, but a very small market. We've got Southeast Asia, an enormous market to the north. Europe and America obviously are sitting there as well. Where are ACT businesses focusing, and where do you think they should focus?
Yeah, so it's a tough one to give a generic answer to, because the short answer is it depends on the product or service offering. There is a market for everything everywhere is the truth. The key is, what are you prepared to do about it? And so I can say to the wine producers in this region that, you know, there is a wine market for you in Singapore, Japan, Philippines, right across Southeast Asia and Northeast Asia as well, and definitely the US. But so I guarantee there is a market for Australian wine in those kind of markets. But what are you prepared to do about it? And that's where the commitment to developing a real strategy comes in. Because if your ambition is to sell wine directly and just hope the sales come, it's not going to turn out that way. You really do need to think about it. But in somewhere like Southeast Asia, the government does have a real focus on Southeast Asia, as many of you would be aware. The Southeast Asia Economic Strategy up to 2040 will be the most populous and dynamic region from a growth perspective in the world by 2040. So it's a key target for Australia. There are our friends and neighbours. There are opportunities across every sector in Southeast Asia. So the food and beverage piece I've already spoken about. Infrastructure, as Southeast Asia develops everything from airports to rail to road, energy assets. So if you're engineering consulting firms focusing on any of those areas, there are definitely opportunities for you across Southeast Asia. And also, something near and dear to the ACT, education. There is definitely appetite and interest in the education sector across Southeast Asia as well. I was privileged enough to work in the Philippines for 5 years as a senior trade commissioner, and education was absolutely a key area of focus for us. And ACT institutions would come to market on a regular basis. Yeah.
How important do you think it is to be in market, actually physically there on the ground?
Yeah, if you think exporting is doing it by remote control only, again, it depends on your product and service offering. I worked in the US as well, and there was this one very switched on pet supply company, we'll call it, had a whole range of pet products and services. They never visited the US market to do direct sales. They were purely an e-commerce business. You're not doing $20 million a year into the US. So for them, it was okay. But if you're looking to do engineering consulting services, or if you're looking to promote wine into a market, you absolutely have to visit. And Austrade, state and territory governments, they all run mission programs and opportunities for companies to join these activities to get into market. Going to a trade show is not the be-all and end-all. It's certainly an important reason to go to a country. So I encourage you to look for opportunities to participate in key trade shows to different parts of the world, where you can understand the market dynamics, you can meet potential customers. But importantly, that's only one visit. You really need to keep going back. So visiting the market is essential. And I really think it's important that you consider that in your planning.
Yeah, so it is really important to plan that out properly and to game plan the long-term strategy, right?
Yeah, and the government's committed to developing Southeast Asia, as I mentioned previously. There will be a range of missions from Australia up to Southeast Asia over the next 12 months. Digital, education, there's some energy, renewables missions going as well across to Southeast Asia. To the US, we've got 4 massive defence events that happens every year in the US. We've just had some large activity in Europe as well, and another one coming up in Poland. So just keep your eyes out on the Austrade website for all these activities that are coming up.
And if you want to get involved with those, details are on the Austrade website.
Yep.
And that's austrade.gov.au.
It sure is, yeah.
Fantastic. And just sort of jumping back though into that market selection, kind of where you might be thinking about going, depends on the product.
Yep.
Depends where you want to invest. Some of or invest your time, I should say. Some of that presumably is going to relate directly to the language skills you might have in your business too, right? Is that a key consideration?
It can be. The capacity within the organisation to fulfil the market opportunity and the management commitment and the resources behind that are essential. I suppose if you look at options for how you get into a market, direct exporting is definitely one channel. But often you will need to have a local partner, and this is where the language can come from. And so the Austrade team in market can help you find a suitable local partner who will help you through the local regulatory frameworks with the language issues, and also about customising your product so it is fit for purpose. Yeah.
So and who do you work with at Austrade? Are you there for everyone, or are you only helping a sort of a group of exporters? And how do you know if you might qualify?
Yeah, so we do try to work with organisations who are what we would call export ready. So companies that are ready to take on the challenge of pursuing export markets across all sectors though. So as I say, from education, food and beverage, defence where I focus, space, we're actually working with quite a few ACT companies who focus on the space industry. So we do go across the board in terms of areas of interest on a sectorial basis, but we do want to hone in on those companies that are really export ready. But we do have some tools available as well. So if you go to business.gov.au, which is the Australian government's entry point for business into all government agencies, there's an export readiness tool on there that people can look at and get some tips and tricks on what they need to think about. We really do encourage people to look at that. It's also a very useful source of information to help with market selection. So if you go in there, have a look at under export, click on Southeast Asia, all of the markets for Southeast Asia will come up, and there'll be a detailed list of what we think the opportunities are across Southeast Asia by country, and for other parts of the world as well. So really lots of resources available for companies to use. We've also got our 132878 number. People can ring and have a chat to one of our team, and they'll give that initial guidance on the phone.
Okay. So in terms of exporting, you obviously want to export where you've got a competitive advantage. Do you have a view as to what industries or sectors ACT businesses might have that competitive advantage in, and what are the unique selling points that the ACT has over other parts of the country?
Yeah. For the ACT specifically, like your expertise in the government sector is renowned, obviously, because there is a very big customer in town that ACT businesses service, and certainly, very specific areas like cyber, for example. There's lots of cyber technology that in companies that are in the ACT that are doing very well globally. So I think you just need to think about who your customer is in the ACT, and then ask yourself a question is, are there similar customers elsewhere in the world? And why should they buy from me? Because in most cases, there will be competition. We all like to think we've got the most unique product service offering and it's not available from anybody else. But in many cases, there are other companies that offer the same thing. And so, having a realistic view in your mind as to why the end user, why the customer should displace their existing supplier and replace them with you, that's the value proposition you have to be able to come up with. And that's what we really need to have a conversation about.
So given the importance of government as a client here in the ACT and the fact that many businesses are very focused on providing services to government, does that mean that businesses here are then looking to perhaps Washington, London, and even Wellington and other capitals as kind of places to find government clients? Do you see that particularly coming out of the ACT?
We do see that a little bit, but it also boils down to what's the target customer group. So if it's national security, there are national security agencies all around the world outside of capital cities as well. And so police forces and so on. So we absolutely target those because, for companies to be able to give us a really compelling reason as to why that customer group should be interested in your product or service offering, that then helps us narrow the focus.
Okay. So in terms of sort of building export capabilities for local businesses, obviously there's some great tools available on the Austrade website. Are there other government initiatives and support programs here in the ACT to help facilitate and enhance export capabilities, apart from, of course, this excellent series of webinars that we're running, thanks to the support of the ACT government?
Yeah, so we work with the ACT government. They also host education types, seminars and activities, and all of the state and territory governments to do a similar thing. There's also organisations like the Export Council of Australia, who have a suite of services or products that can help. And then larger organisations like AI Group and others who also have a range of products or services to help companies, get themselves ready. But depending on the sector you're in, the government does have a range of support available. And if you're in the defence sector, the government just announced $150 million in grants associated with the Defence Industry Development Strategy, which has got a range of streams, one of which is around security and helping companies uplift their security to be able to operate in this the increased threat environment that we all live in with the amount of cyber attacks that are happening nowadays. But also when you look at something like AUKUS and certainly ACT companies are probably very well aware of AUKUS. The obligations for Australia, the UK and the US industry to uplift to be able to deliver product and service to that tripartite relationship. Again, Department of Defence have got grants to help companies do that. So depends where you operate, but you'll typically find there are grants available and support. Austrade's got our own grant program, the Export Market Development Grant Program. That's there to help defray some of the costs associated with export promotion. So if you go onto the Austrade website, you'll see that as well.
Okay. All right. Well, look, just to close this off, I guess, if you've got one big bit of advice for businesses looking to export in terms of how to get started or where to go in terms of getting the products to market, what would that be?
Yeah, so my key advice would be you really need to think about it from an organisational strategy perspective. What are you trying to achieve as a business? And if international outreach or expansion is a key part of that, we're very happy to work with you.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, Anthony, for coming in. Great to have you here at the Canberra Business Chamber and look forward to catching up again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.